Bud Nut Buddy, Chapter 5, bottom of page 37. Two pieces of key vocabulary for this section. The word fumbling means to handle something in an awkward or a clumsy way. You can think of a football fumble. That's when they drop the ball. When you're fumbling something, you're holding it in a way that it's like it's going to slip out of your grip. Another word you'll need for this section is nosy. Nosy means wanting to know other people's business. As a matter of fact, you could even think of it as sticking your nose in other people's business. As we read this short section, you're going to be thinking that you will be ready to stop, think, and paraphrase. In particular, I want you to be thinking about what is in Bud's suitcase. Bottom of page 37. I untied the strange knots that the Amoses had put in my twine and opened the suitcase. I could tell right away that someone had been fumbling through my things. First off, whenever I put the blanket in, I always fold it so that it stops all the other things from banging up against each other. But those doggone Amoses had just stuffed it in without paying no mind to what it was mashing up against. I lifted the blanket out and saw that everything else was still there. You might be able to say that the Amoses were some mean old nosy folks, but you couldn't call them thieves. I picked up the old tobacco bag that I keep my rocks in. I could tell by the way the drawstring was pulled that the Amoses had been poking through this too. I jiggled it up and down in my hand a couple of times, and it felt like none of the rocks was missing, but I opened it to count them anyway. None of them was gone. Next, I pulled Mama's picture out of the envelope I kept it in and held it so the light from the library's side door would shine down on it. It looked like the Amoses hadn't heard it. This was the only picture of Mama in the world. Running across the top of it was a sign that was writ on a long, skinny flag. It said, "Boys and girls, follow the gentle light to the misbegotten Moon Park." Underneath the sign, between two big wagon wheels, was Mama. She was about as old as I am now and was looking down and frowning. I can't understand why she was so unhappy. This park looked like the kind of place where you could have a lot of fun. In the picture, Mama was sitting on a real live little midget horse. Midget means super tiny, smaller than expected. It looked tired and dragged out like those big workhorses do, but it had a teeny tiny body with a big sag where most horses have a straight back. Mama was sitting right in the middle of the horse's back, riding him side saddle, except there wasn't any saddle, so I guess you have to say she was riding him side sag. She had two 6-shooter pistols in her hands, and the way her face looked, you could tell she wished she could have emptied them on somebody. And I know who that somebody was. Mama told me it was her father, my granddad. He'd gone and ruined everybody's fun that day by getting in a big fight with my mother about the gigantic white 25-gallon Texas cowboy hat that she was wearing. Mama used to tell me, that hard-headed man insisted, mind you, that I wear that horrible hat. To insist on something is to demand it, to require it. The hat was almost as big as Mama, and you could see it was a fake, because as tall as it was, no real cowboy could have worn it without getting it knocked off his head every time he rode under a tree or some telegraph wires. Mama told me that some man used to drag the midget horse all through her neighborhood with a camera, and if your mama or daddy signed a piece of paper, he'd take some pictures of you, then come back in a couple of weeks so you could buy them. Mama wasn't looking like she had rocks in her jaw because the hat was so fake that a real cowboy would have laughed you out of town for wearing it. She was mad because the hat was so dirty. When she used to tell me about it, her eyes would get big and burny, like the whole thing happened the day before yesterday instead of all those years ago. She'd start moving around our apartment real quick, picking things up and putting them back in the exact same spot. Filth, she'd say about the hat. Absolute filth. Why, the thing was positively alive with germs. Who knows what type of people had worn it? I'd say, I don't know, Mama. She'd say, who knows how many years it had been worn by who knows how many sweaty little heads? I'd say, I don't know, Mama. She'd say, the entire band on the inside was black, and I'm sure it was crawling with ringworm, lice, and tetters. I'd say, yes, Mama. She'd say, and that horrid little photographer didn't care. Do you imagine it ever occurred to him to wash it? I'd say, no, Mama. She'd say, of course not. We meant less to him than that horse he mistreated so. I'd say, yes, Mama. She'd say, but your grandfather insisted. To this day, I cannot understand why, but he insisted. I'd say, yes, Mama. We had that conversation a lot of times. Me and Mama having the same conversation lots of times is one of the main things I can remember about her now. Maybe that's because when she'd tell me these things, she used to squeeze my arms and look right hard in my face to make sure I was listening. But maybe I remember them because those arm squeezing, face looking times were the only times that things slowed down a little bit when Mama was around. Everything moved very, very fast when Mama was near. She was like a tornado, never resting, always looking around us, never standing still. The only time stuff didn't blow around when she was near was when she'd squeeze my arms and tell me things over and over and over and over. She had 4 favorite things to tell me. One of them was about the picture, and another one was about my name. So in this section, Bud is taking things out of the suitcase and remembering ideas about what he sees and thinks about those items in his suitcase. The first thing we need to do when we stop, think, and paraphrase is make sure we understand the basic facts. So something really key here is understanding what is in Bud's suitcase.